Amazing.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. My phone apparently was connected, and we're going back to having my MacBook. Okay. Lucky that was at the beginning, and I have captions on for those that couldn't hear. Back to, I'm just going to kind of breeze through the terms and definitions because I have links in the slide deck for those that don't know. We'll talk about different image types, but mostly the image types around what we use on the internet. We'll go through different alternative text examples. And then if we have time, I'll have a little bonus section about slideshows and social media. Okay. Oh, we switched things here. Okay. Terms and definitions. We have the ADA, which is the Americans with Disability Acts. This really just ensures that we have equal access not only to jobs, to services and public goods for people with disabilities, and this extends into the digital world as well. Section 508 requires federal agencies to make their technology accessible, and that's for people within and without and out of the federal government using their websites. And to be 508 compliant means to be WCAG compliant, which is a couple slides down. There's some European acts here. One of them is new. I think it's the EN 301 541 standard. It's a mouthful, but that just went into effect in February, and it's a new standard where it involves more public sector stuff across the UK and Europe. And I talked about WCAG. So that's, sometimes we see WCAG, WCAG stands for World Wide Web Consortium is 3C. WCAG is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, so lots of acronyms. And they just normalize how we measure accessibility standards. And these standards are for developers, they're for the developers of tools, they're for the people who make our evaluation tools, and really anyone who's interested in having a guideline to go by, because it's easier to when you develop or design and learn how to do things, to have the guidelines. And there's 3 levels. Right now we're currently kind of in between 2.1 and 2.2. And then the standards are broken into another set of 3 levels, A, AA, AAA, and with each increasing A increases the level of accessibility. So that A level, that's sort of your minimal compliance. It means that your website doesn't meet the usability standards. It's difficult for people to navigate your website, and it's exceedingly difficult for someone with disabilities to navigate your digital assets. AA is the standard. That's what normal compliance is. It means most people can understand and use your website, but not everyone. And AAA is that optimal compliance. This means your website is accessible. It means the maximum number of users, either disabled or non-disabled people, can use it. And again, AA is the standard, but I like to say, if you know you can have a quick fix and most people can use it, why not do the AAA? I'm not a designer, though. Craigslist is my perfectly themed website. So I like things to be consistent from time to time. And POUR means perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And we'll talk about a couple of these ones. Perceivable, meaning you can you can use your senses to navigate the content. Robust means that we can choose how we interact with the website with assistive technology. I'm not going to do these. There's specific website guidelines around perceivable, and they're in this 1-point category. Again, they mostly benefit people who, well, they benefit everybody, but people who are blind or use assistive technology or have images turned off. You know, I live in a real rural area. Like here, the internet's low. I turned off my images so I could download the web pages. And if we don't have alternative text, you know, that person, it just comes out as a broken image. And then it really helps with search engine optimization as well, if that's your side of what you do. When you add alt text to an image, now you have more content for the web crawlers to look at when they go crawl your sites. So there's 4 broad parameters we consider. This is all about 80s music, so this is what it's about. So this is Milo, but we want to make sure that we accommodate visual needs so it's easy to see. We want to make sure that we accommodate motor needs. You know, we don't know what sort of disability someone has, what sort of assistive technology they use. So we want to make sure we accommodate motor needs and people can interact with your website. I don't use a mouse, so I use websites that are keyboard navigable. And this is a picture of Alan from Def Leppard. He has one arm and he's still able to use his drums because they were able to adapt his drum set to the way he plays now. We want to make sure that people can hear our digital assets, so we accommodate auditory needs. When we address these needs, we help people, like I said before, I gave this example, when I'm on the train, I'm in a noisy environment. And it also helps when you're in a quiet environment, right? And you don't want to have the sound on, you're able to, but you don't have your headphones. So we want to make sure that we address auditory needs. And these are the Beastie Boys with a boom box. When they were young, yeah, and 3 of them. And cognitive needs. This is a really wide spectrum of people. Cognitive needs not only means people with developmental disabilities, but it could be people who are tired, who have depression, who have a hard time focusing. So we want to make sure that our content is easy to understand. And this is more, this comes into play too when we have social services where geriatric people are using our sites. And things are, each page is different. That's a cognitive load for some people. So we want to make sure that our websites are easy to understand. And this can be accessible language as well. Kat pulled this, or I said this in Kat's thought, but I've been told when you call something an edge case, you're really defining the limits of what you care about. And I just want to be clear, IBM and Red Hat told me that. So the way we use technology and the way we process information is different from person to person. And when we eliminate that one section of people, we're telling them that we don't care about them. So it's about universal design, right? Okay, so assistive technology, this is anything that helps you get to where you want to go. And when we talk about images specifically, we're talking more about screen readers. There's different types of screen readers. Screen readers basically read the text of your web page out loud. They can be helpful for people with cognitive and learning disabilities as well, because some people use them along with the visuals to understand where they are on the page. And then screen magnification devices. This is pretty much what it says to it, enlarges the content on the screen. And again, people with low vision will sometimes use text to speech because it helps them with the page dynamics. Screen readers, go ahead. So when we talk about alternative text for our digital assets, most of the time, a big use case for this is people who use screen readers. And there's studies that come out every year about who uses a screen reader. They found that 87% of screen reader users live with some kind of disability. And in that very same survey, who uses a website versus our desktop pages, mobile phone use is way above than desktop use. A mobile phone is an assistive technology device. So make sure when we design our assets that we keep in mind that mobile first mentality. Okay, so different image types. Why do we like images? Well, they're not just for decoration most of the time. They enhance our content in meaningful ways, especially for people with learning disabilities, because they can reinforce the content on the page. For people with low vision, they can provide cues for navigation. We already kind of talked about that. In digital spaces, images drive engagement, especially around social media. Posts with images in social media or LinkedIn have a higher click-through rate than when you post an article without an image. People are more likely to follow that link if there's an image attached. So it's not just about adding alt text, it's about adding alt text that's thoughtful and pragmatic to the reason. There's a list of images here. I'm going to go over them as we go. There's a few common uses for images. We use them for links. We use them for logos. We use them for decoration, we use them for orientation, and we can use them for call to actions like buttons as well. So simple images. Simple images convey simple information. This image can be used across the way in different forms, but for the sake of this example, it's just an image on the page to, just have an image. It's not decorative because it adds some value. So when we have an image that's simple, we want to convey the image as concisely as possible to provide content of the image without adding a ton of details. Because if it's not super important to the page, the person with that screen reader, it's going to be a cumbersome experience for this long, drawn out alt text. So for something like this, I might say Minor Threat album cover with a punk rocker with his hands between his knees, We're going to talk about why I would change that alt text in a little bit, but that's our simple image. A headshot is an example of a simple image. So we want to have a person's name. We want to introduce the name. Sometimes we want to say that it's a headshot, but not if it's like on a company page, but if it's on like the top of an article, where you're just introducing it, you might want to say that it's a headshot. If something is happening, but again, it's a headshot, it might be a professional sense, so we don't want to over describe it. But, are they holding an award? That might be important to the headshot. But again, don't over describe. Does anyone have an idea of what they might have as alt text for this image? Do we know who this is? This is Pat Benatar. But that's close. That's okay. That's okay. It's okay. So I would say, Pat Benatar with her hands behind her head, But again, depending on where that headshot is, if it's the company headshot, make sure that you have like their title and that kind of stuff. So decorative images. These are tricky, and I have opinions, so forgive me ahead of time. If an image is purely decorative and doesn't display meaning, there are several ways that you can tell a screen reader to ignore the image. It might be a border, it might be a spacer, it might be a corner, it might be illustrative of the text around it. But when can you skip writing alternative text? I can only think of two examples, and one of them is where the image provides no important information or context, or if the information is repeated in the page. Say we have in the corner, help is needed, and then there's a picture of a sign that says help is needed. You might not want to, mark that. But for me, we need to think about why we included that image in the first place. If you don't describe the image, it means it's not important. So why is it there? But does it convey or invoke emotion? If you don't describe that, those users that can't see it will not be able to solicit that emotion and that, whatever sense of meaning that you need. So I think it's very rare to have a decorative image that you don't need to describe. This one, I don't think you need to describe. I think that you can mark this a decorative image. And you can do that in, well, the best way to do it is most of the time in a Drupal site, you have, required alt image. Don't, I might have it backwards. We want to make sure that there's, it's empty. Some people will just put a period or a space. We want to make sure that that's, you have a space if it's empty because it's required. So you just would have those two quotes and the empty space between it. We don't want to have any sort of period or punctuation. And when we have just the space, the screen readers will skip it.
I wanted to ask, is there I do some accessibility stuff, but usually rely on an expert. Is there an ARIA label, for an image that should be skipped?
Well, for images in Drupal, if you have that null in the middle, it will skip it.
Oh,
yeah.
No, I'm thinking outside of Drupal.
Yeah, you can have an ARIA label. I don't know what it is exactly. ARIA is hard.
But there's, yeah.
Yeah, and the first rule of ARIA is not to use ARIA.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that's a whole nother thing.
Oh.
Kat gives a really good talk on when to use ARIA labels. Yeah.
Oh.
ARIA labels can actually add inaccessible things into your content because semantic HTML is usually accessible by default. Interesting, huh? I don't know all the dynamics around it, but there is an ARIA label that you can use to skip. So here we have an image. It's like could be a border of like stationery or a border of the page. This is mostly decorative. It doesn't tell us anything. I would say you could skip this if you wanted to. They feel any different?
I think it depends on the context.
Right.
What text is there?
Mm-hmm. Especially something like this that you have from page to page, and that screen reader has to read that text from page to page if you have it as a border. So you think about that cumbersome rule too, right? So images of text, we talked a little bit about this. So an image of text is text that's shown inside of an image. If it's not a logo, we want to avoid using images of text. But if you do use them, the text should include the exact words that are in your image. But keep in mind, real text is easier to use for assistive technology. It's easier to read and it's more flexible. As we command ++ and we get the pictures can become pixelated and obscured. So make sure that if you do use picture or images of text that you describe this. Now this is a compilation album where I would say album cover back to the 80s with a picture of a sunset and a palm tree. You want to describe the image as well as that text below it. So logos need alternative text, and there's a couple of rules around logos because assistive technology doesn't understand that if it's a regular image or a logo. So typically the logo has an action item behind it, right? So you want to make sure that you tell the users it's a logo. If there's any text in there, you want to make sure that you have text. So I would say, logo of MTV Music Television. But because there's an action item, I also want to tell the users that if they click on it, it's going to take them someplace else. And I have a couple of ideas for best practices for linked images as well. And most of it is just telling the person that they are leaving the site to go to someplace else, or they're going to a different page, that sort of thing. So groups of images. So I'm talking about this star rating right here mostly on this example. Not bad, not bad. Okay, so if we have multiple images, how would you describe that in a?
Oh, you're asking us?
Yes.
Okay. 5-star rating with, and then I don't know, put in quotes 4.7.
Yeah, so that's how you would do it. But these are all different images, so there's no need to describe every one of those images.
Right.
So what you can say is you leave those null, and on the last one you would say star rating 4 out of 5. Yeah, so you don't have to describe each one of those star ratings.
I took that to mean one rectangular image.
Yeah, no, but these are individual because of it being a rating and the way it's formatted. Yeah.
Okay.
So this one would be Fugazi's, Red album, 4 out of 7 out of 5 stars. And I'm just using this as an example. I think this is a 5-star album, but that's how you describe it. CAPTCHAs. CAPTCHAs is an acronym. Does anyone know what it stands for? It's okay. It's a long one.
Google bullshit.
Almost. You're really close. No, it's completely, I have to read this off my notes, completely automated public Turing test to tell humans and computers and humans apart. CAPTCHA. So it's a challenge that we use on a website to determine if our users are bots. But they are really hard for people with assistive technology or disabilities to navigate. I think the W3C says that asking people to read distorted text is really hard. If you're deaf, it's really hard to be able to just do the things. And then if you use assistive technology, if you have those like identify all the polls, well, if you use alternative text to identify what's in them, that defeats the purpose, and now the bot can read those things. So when we have a CAPTCHA, we just need to make sure that we have different means of people to use it. So this is an example, like people can either do it this way, or they can do a sound version of it and they can type in the sound. I do a presentation about secure, accessible websites. I forget the order of the title, but one of the things I go into is CAPTCHAs and how our old style of CAPTCHAs just shouldn't be on websites anymore. We should have that, are you a computer, with a checkbox, and have it be that. That's standard best practices now. And also just take a pause between filling in your information, right? I know I used to have a script that would fill everything in, and that counts as a bot. So, but CAPTCHAs are extremely hard for people with disabilities to use. So we have complex images. This is really hard to describe, right? There's a lot. We talked about keeping our alt text short and concise because it's cumbersome for assistive technology folks to go through. So when we have these complex images, they can be charts, they can be diagrams, they can be graphs. It's really better. It's okay to use alternative text, but you should have that information on the page as well to reinforce the content. But if you are going to describe this, make sure that you include things like headings. If it's a table, a thing like headings, what is this identifying, making sure that there's labels, making sure you just, like, this is an image of someone, so you want to make sure, I think that's Led Zeppelin, make sure that because it doesn't have the words Led Zeppelin, or no, Pink Floyd, it's right there, oh my gosh. Make sure that you identify, but the complex images have lots of layers. So make sure when you think about someone using alternative text that the layers are, they understand what the rows are reflecting and what the information is, what information is being displayed. What are you communicating, basically? Lots of times you can use a long description, where it goes to a different page. We try not to do that, but if that's something that your website has to do, using the long description, I think that might be an ARIA thing, using long description instead of just the basic alt text. And that gives the assistive technology user the ability to choose which one they want to listen to as well. So this is a infographic. It's a concert poster. It's layered as well. We want to make sure, there's a few different things going on. We have a title, we have an image, and then we have a list of where they're playing. So when you have these infographics, you want to include all of the text that's playing or showing, and then you want to put it in an order that makes sense as well. We're going to say, the Descendants are playing at the Whiskey for 5 nights, and these dates they're playing with these bands. And this lineup is great. I mean, Lagwagon, Mustard Plug, what great stuff. You want to tell that there's all shows, and then you're going to say that there's the album cover of Milo on Everything Sucks. But again, it's that order, making sure that it makes sense that when someone can't see the visual layout of that. Illustrations. So why do you think it's important that we label it an illustration when we write it in our alt text versus an image?
So the person understands that it's a drawing, not a photo.
Right. So John said, so people understand that it's a drawing, and a layer on top of that, it sets an expectation that it's maybe the style or the intent might be different than a photograph. It's more, emotive or something like that, because it's abstract and it's symbolized and it's stylized. So knowing that helps the user. Yeah, totally Pat Benatar. This is an image of Deborah Harry or an illustration of Deborah Harry, and it's got, I don't know what style that is, but like lots of color, boldness, red lips, really making her look like she's in the mood to sing. I'll just put it that way. Functional images. Here you go, Eric. So functional images are images that are also navigable. And there's a whole set of criteria around this. And a lot of this has the same criteria as the other ones. But these are images that have multiple clickable zones. So these are image maps, they're org charts, they're icons, they have buttons, they're all over the place. They're used to trigger actions. So we have these maps. So how do we describe this map? Well, with a lot of detail. You can probably create some sort of script or tokens or however you develop Drupal to do this, but this is a functional image with multiple clickable areas. And you have to include alternative text because there's certain things going on. So this is an image from Google Maps of record stores in San Francisco area. So the overall image, I would say this is a record store map of North San Francisco. But now we need to go through and we need to describe where this goes. So not only does this have alternative text of neck of the woods, we also need to include where that link goes. That link is going to take us to neck of the woods. And sometimes you can manage to have that link and that alternative text all in the same to make it less cumbersome. But for every multiple clickable area, you need to say where it goes. And we don't want to say things like click here to go there, or just click here without it. You don't have to use click because people using assistive technology know that a link it's an activation button. But be specific about the destination or result of those multiple clickable areas. So another functional image is conveying information about something to do. This is opening up in a new window. We don't always open up in the new window. Sometimes we open up in a new tab. When we have older people using our websites and it switches from website to website, what they're doing, it confuses them because they're expecting a window to open, or a tab to open, and a window opens and they can't find it. So when we have icons like this, we want to make sure that we say, open a new window, and then that destination of where we're going. This is a search magnifying glass. This image is mostly decorative, but we do want to make sure that when someone presses the button or is in the field, that they know that that's the search bar. The image is used to give the button a distinct style. If it's important for you to describe that, that's okay. But this is more decorative, but you do want to say that once you activate that, it does the search for you. This image is kind of weird, wonky. This is a standalone image that has a function as well. It's a send to printer, so if you have these, and you make sure that it says this will send to printer. We want to keep these functional alternative text descriptions short and action oriented. Use clear language so that people know what to expect when they hit the image. Yes, Eric.
Is there particular language you should use to indicate that it's an action, or does the screen also tell them that it's a link?
It'll say that it's a link or a button. Yeah. It will tell them that, no matter how you have it labeled. Okay. But making sure that they know that what the action is. So it'll say
print with that,
or send to printer, yeah. Depending, because print doesn't always mean the same thing. It could print to your empty doc or however you want to have it, depending on what your application is. So short enough to be specific. So some do's and don'ts. I have no idea if that's how you're supposed to do do's, but we're going to go with it. So don't begin your alternative text with the copy that says image of, picture of, unless it's like a screenshot or something like that, or that illustration, because people that use assistive technology know they're on an image, or if they have it programmed, the assistive technology will announce it. So if you have that on there, it's redundant for some of those. It'll say picture of, So we avoid doing that. We don't want to use file names as our alternative text. It does no good. I know lots of people will do it for SEO and things like that, but just take the time and take out the hyphens and the dot ping and you'll be good. Don't be too wordy because, again, it could be cumbersome. There are opportunities to be wordy, but most of the time we want to keep it short. Don't use emojis and special characters because some screen readers don't know how to read special characters, and emojis, they read them all in line. So if you have smiley face, and then your description, then smiley face, and then more of your description, that screen reader will read all of those emojis. And screen readers, people who use screen readers don't care about emojis. So let's just keep those out, like any ASCII art, anything like that. And don't rely on artificial intelligence because we know that they can hallucinate, they can be vague, they might not convey the meaning you want it to convey. So, but what can we do? We want to think about why we're including the image. We want to make sure that if it's showing a process, that we identify that. If it's supporting a point in the text, we want to mention where the picture is taken, if it's relevant. It could be, at the zoo, at the barnyard, at a school. We want to note any symbolic colors because they might evoke emotion. Reds and oranges evoke different emotions than, yellows or blues and purples. If the image expresses emotions like joy or sadness or excitement, and that's important, we want to put that. We want to identify if people are in the image. If it's known or relevant, maybe, tell who the person is or describe their role, something like AmyJune standing at the podium, or Eric and Tim and John Keeley hiking and resting at the top of a mountaintop, things like that. And then you want to describe any key elements. And then if it's important, what is happening? Is someone giving a speech? AmyJune in front of the podium delivering a presentation. But not all descriptions are created equal. When we have that documentation that describes, the rules and the guidelines and of what is alternative text, it really kind of puts it into a one-size-fits-all, but not all images are created equal. So we need to keep in mind the descriptions as they need to be responsive to the context. So I have this, we have Nina, and this is a clip from the video 99 Red Balloons. So, to anyone that might not know this image, and they use it in a blog article for something, it could be a woman standing in a field. But I know that that's not the emotion I want to portray. So it's a woman walking in an empty field with balloons on the ground amongst explosions. There's a little bit different emotion going on with that. Both are correct descriptions, but depending on where your photo is, and this Drupal makes it a little hard sometimes with the media because you put in that image and you have the reusable image library and it puts that alt text in. And then you're like, oh, that's not the alt text I want to use. So you change the alt text and now the alt text changed on the other page as well. So be conscious of that when you're using Drupal. If you don't have those, I think there's an extended module you can use that will separate those two. A good example would be too, like, I think I use this, I'll just use the one I used yesterday in Cat's Talk. You can have an animal sitting in a field, and that's fine. But then you can have an animal sitting in the zoo that looks lonely and has no company. It's determining, whether or not it's just, a kid's piece or it's an op-ed or a news article. So I have some fun examples. Again, 80s music. I think there's one 90s thing that snuck in, so please forgive me. So I have this alternative text, men with makeup. Okay, so we have men with makeup, and we have men with makeup. They're both men with makeup, but they're completely different images. So if we wanted to sort of think about what they might be, how would you describe this image more?
excessive or caricature makeup.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the one on the right, I might be more specific
Mm-hmm.
and just say men with eyeliner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, depending on the piece, right?
Right.
So this is just more specific,
Sure,
you know.
sure.
So I have Twisted Sister band member Dee Snider with black leather fringed outfit on and a very colorful face makeup. There's a lot of ways you can describe this, and how much you describe it depends on the context, right? And then I have a very smug Dave Navarro wearing eyeliner before a photo shoot. You know, they're both men with makeup, but the alternative text, you know, really defines and gives a picture for our viewers. We have Rio. If you know me, you might guess what's coming up next. So this is Rio, very valid. And then we have Rio, right? They're both Rio, but very different images. So this one, you know, this is a very descriptive image. This might be in a tourism magazine or something, you know, a wide view of the iconic Christ the Redeemer statue, outstretched arms standing atop Mount Corcovado, overlooking the cityscape of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with hazy mountains and a coastline in the background. Again, this text would be for something like a travel journal. But if we had something a little bit less, you know, maybe it was just in a school report, we might condense it to a statue of Christ Redeemer standing over the city of Rio. Again, that context. And then Rio, it's an illustration, illustrated album cover for Rio by Duran Duran, featuring a stylized woman with black hair and red lips by artist Patrick Nagel. Again, a little bit more detail because this might be Rolling Stone's top 10 albums of 1985. It wasn't, but it should have been. So we have Dead Bug. So this is a dead bug, and that's a dead bug. So again, they're both dead bugs, but the text just doesn't give us enough. So this is a simplistic one. This might be in a Ranger Rick magazine, a bug on a green leaf carrying a stack of dead bugs on its back. And people who can't see these images, it's going to be really surprising what that next image is going to be. So that next dead bug is a vintage rusted out Volkswagen Beetle sitting underneath a tree with a Grateful Dead logo on its hood. And that explains to the person that can't see it what it is. I have Paul Revere. This is a statue of Paul Revere. Or this is Paul Revere and this is Paul Revere. Both very different. So this Paul Revere is the bronze statue. And I'm going to describe what he's doing a little bit. If it was a wide angle picture, I might describe that it's in a park. Again, it's that context. And then this one, it's the 7-inch of the single from Beastie Boys, Paul Revere album. And depending on where you are, you know, there's a lot of text on here, but I do indicate that it's a vinyl and that I try to, if it's important, have all of the text that's on there. I think I have one more, maybe two more. So I have Flock of Seagulls. We know what's coming up, a flock of seagulls and a flock of seagulls. And then, you know, we're going to talk about, again, the context. This is a very wordy description, but I'm talking about the seagulls flying across the sky. They're scattered. Maybe they're, you know, migrating. Well, seagulls don't migrate, but, you know, maybe they're, you know, a disturbance happened at the dump. You know, the tractor comes through and they're all flying away. A kid ran across the park and all the seagulls are flying away. And then we have the flock of seagulls pose in the 1980s style, wearing, you know, fashy clothes, exaggerated hairstyles, including the lead singer's swooping hairdo. Again, you might add more or less depending on where this is for your digital asset. Oh, I have two more. Wow, how much time? Okay, we'll just breeze through these. Talking heads. You know, we have television casters with talking heads, and then we have talking heads. So as I describe them, you know, I'm talking about what they're doing, their background. You know, they have their Channel 4 logo behind them. They're dressed in 70s attire. And then I have the Talking Heads band, you know, where they're wearing their brightly colored mismatched fabric. You know, it's kind of iconic to them. And then one more, The Cure. We have a cure. I'm a nurse. And then we have The Cure. So this is, you know, medical syringes with, you know, blister packs, kind of blurry. And then the other one is the cover of Cure's Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me album. And again, up to you how much you want to write. You know, maybe you're describing the goth scene in the 80s, so you want to go a little bit further and talk about the scrawls and the colors and the background because of what emotion it evokes. So this is where I have a stop in case I talked too long and didn't know how much. So I have this. And then if you want to go on, I have, if you want to look at the slide deck, I think we post these on our website afterward, links to the slide deck. Don't know.
We're posting the videos. I'm not sure about slides.
Okay, so I'm going to leave this up for a second for people who are watching the video, because there's links and then there's a section on slideshows. And bottom line, it's not much of a presentation. If you use, you shouldn't use slideshows, and I give some information about if you do use slideshows. And then I have things about social media and how you can access social media and how you can drill into different social media platforms and add your alternative text. So thank you. I appreciate everyone.